Hey, how are you? Good. I can't, I
Pretty
can't.
good. How are you? I said.
Okay, now we go. Here we go.
I'm like, I was muted. How's baby going?
Good. I have my camera off because I'm holding her. So she's starting to wake up. We'll see if she's quiet while I talk. We'll see.
Oh, happy for you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna turn this off and then let people in. Okay, are you ready? Hi, everybody. Come on in. We'll get started in just a second. I'm just going to let all of you in and then I'll go over a few things. Let everyone get connected. Let's get started in just a second. So I'm Heather. I'm the one that usually sends out our workshop emails. It's good to see. I see a lot of familiar people in here, so it's good to see you guys. Just a few things per usual. You are coming in muted. That's just so we don't hear any background noise, but you're more than welcome to unmute yourself if you have any questions. I think we all know Zoom pretty well, but if not, you can unmute yourself by hitting the microphone or holding down the space bar to speak on your laptop or computer or tapping to speak on your phone. So there's a few different ways. Another way is to communicate is through the chat feature. So you can send a chat to me. My name on here is BH Webinar, in parentheses it says host. You can send it to me directly and I can ask the question for you if you want it to be more kind of confidential, or you can send it to the entire group. So it'll say everyone and everyone will see your question. And sometimes that's nice because you'll get dialogue back and forth from maybe someone else going through a similar situation or some suggestions. So it's really just whatever your comfort level is. So yeah, either way, you can send those. You guys are all coming in with your videos off. That's because this is recorded on my computer and it's going to go on YouTube. So if your video is on, it's going to automatically push you to my recorded screen and you're going to be in the recording. So I have them all turned off, so you'd have to intentionally turn it on. So we don't usually have that happen, but you can if you want to. So it's up to you. Just know you will be in the recording and you will be on YouTube if you do that. And then with the recording, I will send that out to you by Friday. It just depends on how fast my computer wants to work as far as editing and uploading it. But watch for that by Friday. And if you don't see it, send me an email, but you should get it. So just watch for that. I think that's it. So I'm going to turn it over to Carol and let her get started. She's out of our Orem office. She's one of our therapists there and she's awesome. So I'm going to let her go ahead and get started.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we'll get going here. So I'll kind of, as a few people still trickle in, we'll go over a few of those things that Heather just talked about again. But just keep your cameras off and that's all good. If you want to send me a message, go ahead and send it in the chat. I'll be asking some questions. We'll kind of engage a little bit. You can always raise your hand. I'll stop and answer your questions or comments. I have time at the end, hopefully, to do some of that for sure. And references and everything will be at the end. I always bring up things in the middle that just, get brought up. So if you have more questions, I will always feel free to just always email me. So it's just Carol@blomquisthale.com, with Carol with the Y. So I'm Carol, and Heather said, as Heather said, I'm in the Orem office full time. I'm a clinical mental health counselor. CFLE is a certified family life educator. I've got several other certifications on top of that, but that's an ongoing certification that I have, my undergrad and ongoing. So it's fun. I like doing these webinars and teaching. Of course, I never thought that I would be doing it, this way, but it's awesome. Done a lot of live groups and a lot of groups of all kinds. 7-8 years of anger management, domestic violence, substance abuse, court-ordered groups for of the offenders, for folks that have offended in some way or another. And so I love doing those groups. I love teaching and all those that came along with all that. And those were all live and nice, big, nice, closed, confidential processing and closed groups. So this way, doing it with Zoom and doing it live like this is great. So we can still interact. Feel free to keep interacting in this in any way that you can. And if you're familiar how this all works, right, is that these all go on YouTube after. So you can go back and watch them whenever you want. If I reference several of the other ones that we've already done, like Irritability is Not My Style, Part 1. That was a request from several companies a little while back, after COVID began, and there was noticeable irritability in people, and in, you know, everyone's noticed a little bit more irritability that's come up. Definitely, statistically, I'm trying to find like 2000, 2001, 2002, you know, which we don't have anything on 2002 of how the statistics are with our anger and irritability. So if you haven't watched Part 1, go to YouTube, watch it if you want to. You still will review a little bit today on Part 1, but I go into more aggression today and other things like that. So as you know, clarity is really important. So we get to clarity, and which is education to me. We have, that's the majority of it, because if we know something, then we can find a solution, hopefully, or do something about it. But if we don't know what it is and define it, it's really hard to do that. So I do quite a bit of that educating, right? So we're going to define anger and defenses and mechanisms, bulldozing brain cycle, a little bit of proactive and reactive aggression. If you haven't heard those terms, that's just, there's two types of aggression. And so, of course, we define the root of some of that just anger and rage in Part 1 of this. And so that's why I thought, well, let's do a Part 2 of this and kind of elaborate some more. Some of my workshops, they go really fast, and I could spend the whole hour on 2 slides because there's so much to it. But so I do put a lot of information in each one. And so just know that you're going to get the PowerPoint and the recording later, or you can watch it later. It's not a big deal, but I do go fast, and just how it works. I probably slam way too much into each one of these, but oh well. We're going to talk about repair, how to practice stop, STOPP, tools and resources. So we'll go over quite a bit of all of that. Hopefully we'll get to all that, right? So here's some stats. 2018, 84% of people surveyed says that they're way more angry than a generation ago. Do you feel that? I mean, we're more irritable than our generation. I don't know. I mean, it seems like it. If you're watching the news and there's anger and there's frustration, it's like, oh man, we are so much more angry than we used to be. I'm not angrier than my generation, so I don't know, but we'll have to see if, you know, the jury's still out on that one. And so here's the little poll there. The rage and aggression on the roads, okay? So this is always just a fun one, right? I was trying to find 2001, 2002. So what happened when COVID hit is of course there were so many less people on the road. So we're like, wow, this is nice. But I know I found one, and I can't find, you know, there was aggression as far as road rage was up 300% in some places. And it's like, what's going on, right? So 2019, this little AAA has some, you know, breakdowns of the road rage. 80% of drivers express anger, aggression on the road behind the wheel, at least once in the past year. So that was like, 2018, 2019, but it's like, I think it's way higher than that, probably, right? But yeah, of course, like one time out of the year, most of us are gonna, 80% of us are gonna be like, yeah, we're having some road rage. But that's a dangerous place to be with road rage. I don't know about you, but being honked at, or all the very irritability, it definitely, what is it about us displacing on a stranger? That's bullying, bulldozing. Displacing is displacing your emotion onto someone else that's completely innocent. What is it about bullying and all those things? But what is that? I would like to, let's dive into what is going on there. There's two chemicals that we call chemicals. And you can either go, love is soul and fear is ego. Usually we can define it as that, very simple. And there's just two things. Heather Forbes, I always bring up a book, and sometimes I don't reference when I'm just talking about books, but Heather Forbes brings up these two, for example, in Beyond Consequences in Parenting. She uses two. You are either in fear or love when you are behaving or in doing something in your behavior. So true. There's only two. So when a child or us or any adult is acting out of fear, you're not going to be able to be taught. There's not going to be a really good consequence that's going to you have to come out of fear and get into the middle somewhere, which we call wise mind also. So there's logic and emotion. So you can keep that going in the middle, or you can be all the way over here, all the way over here. But we definitely want, fear's not going to go away. Fears are fight, flight, or freeze. It keeps us alive. So let's talk about that. So this is one slide I had from part one, and I have this in many different other slides about fight, flight, or freeze. So our anger, okay, there is 3 definitions and types of anger. This is what I taught years and years and years ago, many times about this. Now I have put fight, flight, or freeze connected to this. I don't know, I have not found it yet where this is in print, but this is where I will have to write a book and put these different things that are connected. So I always take this and then connect it, and they always usually line up, right, with lots of different books and lots of different research articles. But we know that 3 types of anger. There's aggressive, passive aggressive, or passive. So that is fight, flight, or freeze to me. That's just simple. It is, and it's very very concrete. So here's fight is aggression, and passive aggressive is you say yes, but you really mean no, and then you kind of get like resentment because you say yes and you really mean no, and then you get angry about that resentment because you said yes, but you really mean no. It's really confusing. And then passive is just everybody else is right and you're wrong, and that's when you freeze and you shut down. Now freeze, passive, stuffers, stonewalling, all those are the same kind of personalities of behavior. So if you're a stuffer, you're going to turn into a volcano. That's passive. That's just, I'm going to shove it all down, and you will eventually volcano. That's what that's called. So, and then assertive, of course, is just direct with respect. The statements that you use is I feel and I need and I'm willing to do this. And usually the cycle, the clue here is you're having thinking errors. It's emotional, you're having a physiological reaction, then you have behavior. So this is just a very quick basic of how the brain works. You have a thought that comes in, you have a feeling, then you have a behavior. And so when it just spins to a behavior and you're just straight aggressive, that's what happens. So we're going to go into more aggressive stuff today. Rage, aggression, irritability. Yes, irritability, anger, they're secondary emotions from mad, but the deeper rooted stuff we're going to get into. Okay, everybody with me so far? We're doing good. You need to chat me. Everybody's in, going. So what's your normal, if you've got paper and pencil, if you've got a pen and paper, best thing, we're going to have a couple things that you can write down and do a little quick check-in. So what's your normal functioning with your fight, flight, or freeze? It's not in your frontal lobes. When you're in fight, flight, or freeze, you are in the back, you are in survival, you are in stress response brain. Okay. So what's your normal functioning when you're in these, or when you're not? Like, do you stay out of fight, flight, or freeze as much as possible? Do you get caught up with it? Does your stress hormones restrict and hijack you? Your mood, memory, and motivation, so your sleep and emotional management goes to crap. Literally. We're going to talk about sleep. I always do. And there's a workshop that I did all on just this book of why we sleep. But what happens to your cortisol levels? When your cortisol levels are high, your serotonin is low. So that's your happy hormone. And that's also 90% of all that is in the gut. And so your serotonin, melatonin, and dopamine are in the gut. So we have to always, I'm an inside out person, certified and trained in integrated medicine for mental health. So inside is the gut. And so here's our normal circadian rhythm. Here's our normal cycle over here. Is like, here's what happens, brain, cortisol, brain. So when you have a stress response system, fight, flight, or freeze, it sends it a message, and you store that, and it really sends everything to your whole body, that your physiological response, which keeps us alive, keeps us running, keeps us slamming on the brakes, when we're on the road, instead of slamming into someone else. It keeps us awake. It tells us to move really fast or to conserve energy so we can get through a really stressful situation. But in relationships, in life, we can't stay in it. So if we're staying in it, we're going to go into burnout, all those other things that we're not going to get into today. But that's just remember where you're at. What is your normal functioning? Are you burned out? Are you sleep deprived? Are you emotionally unmanaged? Do you have mood, memory, and motivation issues that are restricted? Then you are sitting in this more than you know, probably. It's not going to be really easy to go through to get to your frontal lobes. So just a reminder, this is my whole slide that I teach on for forever and so many times. So here's your main reasons why we're not in the frontal lobes and we're in the fight, flight, or freeze midbrain all the time in stress response. There's maybe a mental health disorder, PTSD. You're impaired. Real quick, you're burned out, or you're in fight, flight, or freeze. So we've gone over most of those, right? Those fight, flight, or freeze, you're just in the wrong part of your brain more often than not, and you're not going to be sleeping good. Sleep causes anxiety and depression, causes unmanaged behavior. It's not the other way around. It's not that anxiety causes sleep issues, it's sleep issues that cause anxiety and depression. Fact. And I teach that in the anxiety program for sure. Okay. So there's lots of research on that now. We have neuroscience that backs that up. Okay. So again, here's the brain. Your midbrain is flooding, fight, flight, or freeze, flashbacks, ruminating, intense fear. Your chemicals change. Okay. Your chemicals actually change. Your genes can change. That means that we can change them back because we know that now. So your survival stress response. So just remember, where is your functioning? Where are you at? Are you in the frontal lobes where we process, have reasoning, have a reward system? We can plan and objectively have, just self-talk in the frontal lobes, or are we in the midbrain? in the past. We won't, this is where anger sits for sure, right? It's all what the body stores in the past. It's what our past that gets to us. That's really depleting. And I wrote something down from Huberman podcast that was so profound. I was like, okay, so I'm a big fan, and I have him referenced in the back of this PowerPoint. But Huberman podcast, he's a neuroscience scientist, and I listened to his podcast at 73 on aggression and anger like 3 times. And man, it was so true about how it's like, okay, and aggression doesn't just change one gene, okay? It changes genes that goes into a flooding of other genes, okay? So we will, he does talk about testosterone and estrogen. So it's not just one gene, it's the whole, these things change, okay, into, it's not just one gene. But what happens is those can be activated. And so, yeah, it's very, very interesting about what we're learning in impulsive behavior. What else on that one? So, yeah. The brain goes off experiences rather than knowledge. Okay. I don't have that written down in here anywhere, but the brain goes off experiences. So we have knowledge of this. So this is the problem when I taught a lot of anger management and domestic violence groups. It's we go off experiences. When someone comes at us, we're going to go into, that reactive or proactive response in aggression. It's not going to be because we have knowledge and we've learned all this stuff. So we have to relearn and retrain and rewire our brain first. That takes a little bit. So if you have a response system that is just automatic, that's experience of like, everyone's out to get me, right? And so we need some knowledge, but we can switch around. So why would I teach you this if you go off experience rather than knowledge? Good question. Chemicals transmit nerve impulses. Okay, so they act as communicators to the body, right? So that's your fight, flight, or freeze. They act as communicators. They send a message, and they're runners that run the race. Okay, I just love this analogy from this book, Buried Alive. I've got that book here too, but half of them are in Orem, some of them I have double copies of, but this one I have right here. But it's just one quote that I've used to kind of do a visual on the race, right? So those runners are a race to every organ and cell through the emotional chemicals of our desire, memories, dreams, everything, right? And our experiences, so which gives us the mind and body response. So the fear will activate our fight or flight or freeze midbrain, okay, remember, and may produce tears, for example. So crying literally serves to relieve the stress that has caused a continual chemical emission that eventually leads to illness, yet emotions help us survive. That is so powerful to me, because we try to stop the emotions and we try to teach our kids, especially, to stuff them still. We don't emotionally coach. So emotional intelligence, part 1, part 2, emotional coaching on the workshops are all great things to go into, because there's so much to this that you have to go into the emotional intelligence so we can survive, right? But we have to let out also and relieve stress in a healthy way. Okay, so the defenses to anger and shame and aggression, okay? So there's 2 parts. One's physical, one's emotional. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory, right? Here's a whole bunch of examples. of how that looks. Is there anything on here that isn't self-explanatory that anyone wants to go over? You know what gaslighting is, you know what manipulation is, hostile thoughts, thinking errors. The thinking errors class is super good on YouTube too. So we don't have time to go into that, but that leads us, right? So thought, feeling, behavior, remember? So here's the thought, here's the thinking. If you have a thinking error or a hostile thought, and then if it sends you into a feeling, which it will, and then here's the behavior. The behavior is what we have to control. So what, does anyone know anything about flooding? What that means? We use Gottman, John Gottman uses flooding as a word, as lots of his 40 years of research with couples. He talks about flooding. So it's a physical and an emotional. So for an example, they're both, right? So they're direct and indirect. So you can have both. And that would be beyond fight, flight, or freeze. It's the whole, it's like I describe it as shock. So it's fight, flight, or freeze. Here's my favorite F words. And then here's flooding, my favorite F word. So it's like, here's all the 4 F words, right? And here is what happens to us. We are so overloaded that flooding can happen, and it can completely put our bodies into shock. Like we're having a stroke, we're going to pass out. We actually can pass, you know, like you're going into, like your leg's broken or your leg, or you're bleeding to death and your body goes into shock. That's what flooding is like. Go ahead, who just raised their hand.
Hey, Carol, I've had a couple questions come in and I apologize if you've answered them. A few minutes ago, someone asked, are we supposed to self-talk? Self-talk is good, right?
Good question. If you're not self-talking, then you're basically completely dead. I don't know how else to put it. So there's processing, and then there's 2 types of self-talk. We focus and then we process, right? So a little ADHD brain is going to have a hard time focusing. Autism has a hard time processing. So meaning they don't have self-talk as well. Now, when you're just, everybody has self-talk, but it's depending on how you can do it and how often. So if you're not processing, it's not. So this is the example of self-talk. The kid behind you is hitting their pencil, and I actually do this in my office all the time. And they're hitting their pencil on the desk, and they're hitting their pencil. And one kid will self-talk and be like, oh, that's so annoying. I'm going to ignore it. I think I'm going to be okay. Maybe I'll just go walk over here for a minute. The other kid won't be doing that as much. They'll be like, they'll just super hyper focus on the noise, and they can't process the noise. That might be an oversensitive kid too. And I have a workshop coming up in a month or 2 about that. So so we have to be in the frontal lobes to self-talk though. So if we're back here, we got to bring ourselves back to the present. You're not in the present when you're not self-talking. Does that make sense? So yes, we want to get you back to the frontal lobes to self-talk. So now with fight, flight, or freeze, we don't self-talk, okay? So that's why I said, if you don't self-talk, you may be dead, but we do. Okay, I'm going to counter myself here, whatever the word is. Okay, so when you're in fight, flight, or freeze, you're not going to say, oh my gosh, I think I'll take my foot off the gas and put on the brake because there's a car smashed up in front of me. Oh, the traffic's slowing down. What should I do? Swerve? Or maybe I'll get over. You don't do any of that. You just slam on the brakes, or you get over, or you get crushed, and then you like, do something. You either fight, flight, or freeze. You either get over, you slam on the brakes, or you do nothing and you slam into the car in front of you. Because you just flood. You don't know what to do. And so you just do something really fast, right? The best thing that you knew how to do in the moment of a really fast trauma stress response brain, right? So if that makes sense. So yes, then we have to come back to the present and self-talk. If you are not self-talking, you won't make it. But at the same time, we have to just get, into fight, flight, or freeze when we need to. But that's to live and that's to survive. That's when we're out hunting for our food, but we don't have to do that anymore. So hunters have that flooded. They stay in flooded 3 times longer than the female. So we need to self-talk. Yeah. So what's the other question? Or if that didn't make sense, then chat me.
I've got a couple more. Someone said, what is gaslighting?
Okay, back to gaslighting. So gaslighting is this example, okay? So let's see, where were we? Anyways, let's see, it was back a while. Back. So gaslighting here is an emotional, it could be indirect. So basically, I'm going to put on my emotions onto you, my problems on you, and then tell you it's your fault. This is passive aggressive. So remember the middle. So here's fight, flight, or freeze. Flee or flight is passive aggressive. The next step is manipulative. The next step is vindictive. That's on purpose, extreme, zero empathy, on purpose, just mean. You don't have any regard for human behavior, human rights. You're very vindictive. Then it's gaslighting. And I call that the pond scum of it all. It's way, way, way down here. It's past vindictive. I'm going to do it on purpose and I'm going to emotionally abuse you, manipulative behavior, but it's on purpose and I have the problem. And so I'm going to blame you for my problem and tell you that you have the problem emotionally. So do you see how that makes people go cray. So that's a whole, look up that one. I have that one. I explain that one more in the Boundaries with Toxic People, which is probably the most popular on the YouTube channel. So Boundaries with Toxic People is a good one. Okay, anything else?
Yeah. Which is great. I'm glad that they're asking questions. I might be saying this wrong, but what is maladaptive behaviors?
So that's just like, so think of adaptive behaviors. It's what we associate. So we can't come out of what's our norm, right? So every time someone cuts you off, you every single time you drive after them. Every time your kid yells at you, you yell back. Maladaptive. So it's almost like it's what you fire and then it wires together. And it's like it's changing genes in your body. It's completely making it so it's sticking. And it something like that. That might not be the best description, but it's like your normal patterns. It's looping. I call it looping, like you just keep looping into the same patterns. And then someone said in the chat, self-talk helps us get into the frontal lobes. It's the other way around. Self-talk is in the frontal lobes. So if you move back to the frontal lobes, then you're self-talking. So there's a scale on that, and it's 0 to 10. So this is how I explain it. So it's 7, 8, 9, 10. 7.5, you're not self-talking anymore. You're just completely reactive and you're going into a panic attack, right? For example. So 7.5 to 10, you're not self-talking anymore. You're in complete survival. You're going to fight, flight, or freeze. But you go back to a 6 and a 5 and a 4, you're going back to reasoning in your frontal lobes. So you have to be in your frontal lobes to be self-talking, to say, hey, let's observe what we're doing here. And when we're past 7 to 8, you're not going to be listening. You're not going to be able to be coached. You're not going to learn from your behavior. So think about that when your kid is having a tantrum. So.
Okay. And then one of our participants has a question. Sydney, I don't know if you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask it.
Yeah. Yeah, can you go back to the slide where it talked about the defensive or the reactions? That lists. Yeah, right here. Okay, so I was just wondering what side of the equation is this on? Like, this is the person who those things are being done to, they react like this, or the person who is like does these things
Too, yeah,
when
direct or
they
indirect.
get angered? I don't know. Like, I'm trying to figure out the relationship. Like,
It
if
can
two
be either,
parties were doing this.
yeah, so it can be, so one person towards another, it can be direct, into just a physical, but it's just what you're doing, what they're doing, anybody. Does that make sense? Is that what you're asking? It can be both of you, of course, but this is two people. So anytime we're doing anger, shame, and aggression, yes, you can have one person punching a wall. And I had lots of those, it's like, okay, that's not domestic violence. If you punch a wall by yourself and there's no one around, nobody around, that's just your own aggression. If you do it anywhere with anyone around, person or a domestic, person like that you live with or a family member, that's domestic violence. You can't break your own crap because that's domestic violence. So, so you can hurt yourself or others, right? So you can fight, you can harm others or self in the physical destructive behaviors.
And I guess you're doing that in response to feeling angry or like to being in a fight or flight mode.
Yeah, the defenses. Yep. So that's
Okay.
a defense mechanism. So there's a whole list of defense mechanisms next to thinking errors, and that's in thinking errors part 2. And so there's defense mechanisms like denial, displacement, gaslighting is a defense mechanism, bulldozing, beyond just thinking errors. They're defense mechanisms to an emotion or to a trauma or to something else. And we'll talk about that in the root issue. So yeah, these are just examples of what could be physically and what could be emotionally done.
Cool. And so if you are a recipient, so say someone's gaslighting you, then you could also go into a fight, flight, or freeze mode and start reacting the same way.
Absolutely. You're going to, because it's going to make you feel crazy. Gaslights is someone that is very manipulative and hostile in their, delivery. So yeah, that's indirect. And that's why it feels so crazy. It's like, wait, it's almost like it's not, direct, like a verbal, just a passive aggressive statement, like you're being a jerk. Okay, that's manipulative, it's passive aggressive, it's everything. But gaslighting is you're being a jerk because I'm doing this, but you're the one that's the jerk, but the person's really the jerk. If that makes sense. It's really confusing. It makes it for a syndrome. A lot of people are in a syndrome with gaslighting and a lot of crazy behaviors. And that's a high conflict couple. If you're in that kind of stuff, in this emotional part right here, very high conflict, hostile. Yeah, it's awful because physical is bad enough, but then we get into the emotional on top of that. So here's the 2 types of aggression inside those aggressions. So here's emotional and physical, but then here's the proactive and reactive. Okay. So I'm going to get you before you get me. That's proactive. So a child like hits a peer in order to take their snack or food or toy. So it's like, and sometimes if their child's under 3, they don't actually have that ability to understand that. So they go and grab it. And they're proactive in getting aggression out, reacting because they want to get it before someone else gets it. If that makes sense. And then reactive is like, I have a threat or a frustrating event. So I'm going to, being only to remove the provoking stimulus. So they're going to remove that person or thing because they think that there's a threat coming. So that's, definitely your fight, flight, or freeze, a threat. So, but both of these, they have contrasting expressions. They produce factors. There's neutral pathways, development functions. So don't even worry about that too much. It's too deep. But these are the basic, like, examples. So proactive is less emotional. It's for a reward. So it's very like it's calculating and it's like, I'm going to go take your thing. I'm going to go take your toy before someone else takes it, because I want it, right? So, and I want the reward. It's bullying, it's domination, it's teasing, it's passive aggressive. So teasing is very passive aggressive, actually. It's so contempt. I'm going to go over that in a later slide of Gottman's Four Horsemen. So contempt is passive aggressive or teasing, or and bullying is defensive. So the reactive is the response to the threat, remember, and then it's because you don't have control, so lack of control, and it's tantrums and temper and hostility. So if you're doing a tantrum with a temper, it's because you have no control, and it's a response to maybe the threat is that, you know, your mom is, you know, leaving to go to work, and so there's a tantrum, or I don't get what I want, so I'm going to tantrum because there's a threat of me not being emotionally, you know, or being emotionally neglected or something. So that's an attachment tantrum. So if mom leaves, and then I'm going to throw a tantrum or something like that. So the response is definitely more of like, I don't have control, as opposed to proactive. It's like, I have control. I'm just going to go take that toy. I'm going to just bully. I'm going to be really domineering. I'm going to be a progressive persecutor is what it's called too, which is a bully. You're going to persecute everyone, and you're going to persecute them for reward. You think about an adult in your adult life. Have you persecuted someone to get a reward? Most of us have. And then we're like, wait, that's not the reward I wanted. That was not, no, hopefully you repair that and you don't do that again. Okay, so take a minute. Let's take 5 minutes. And this is a simple, when I, anger management evaluation, when I used to do them, I used to do substance abuse evaluations, anger management evaluations, DV evaluations, and lots of fun stuff. But just see where you're at. I threw this in today a little bit later. I thought, yeah, let's just see where we're at. Just see where you're at. If you have a problem with aggression, or is someone else displacing on you, and so it's causing you to feel like it's your fault that they're angry, or gaslighting, you're always depressed, or you're always being a victim, but they're the ones depressed and being a victim. They displace in a gaslighting way. They're going to light you on fire after they gas you. That's how it feels. So just write down a number 1 to 5. Irritable with people. I felt angry. I felt like I was ready to explode. I was grouchy. I was annoyed. So that irritability, those are all just really good irritabilities, right? It's like, I feel really annoyed. And so you feel like you're just going from 0 to 10 really fast with annoyance. And if you go to 0 to 10, you remember you're not self-talking with 5, 6, 7, 8. And if I teach you skills on how to get you back to self-talking to a 5, then that's good. But 8, 9, 10, you're not getting too far. With that, you're just going to go straight to a 10. So while you're filling that out, let me make sure that's not covered it up. I look at the chat for a minute. Yeah, so that chat, the last one here, about family members that kind of gaslight you and displace on you. So there's 2 workshops on that. Okay. And these would be very, very helpful. 1, bullying in the home. It's just called bullying. It's a parenting one. So we are bullying in the home. I found statistics on that about who we're angry with. We are angry with our own family members like times 10, more than anyone else. Road rage is like next. Why is that? Why are we so irritable and so mean to the people we love? It's actually a book too. syndrome. Why are we so mean? Why do we magnify and hurt the people we love the most? It's a good question, right? We don't do that to complete strangers. I hope not. And then the other one is boundaries with toxic people. And there's part 2 to that one too. That one is like by far the most watched, I guess, on the YouTube channel. And I've done those, of course. So just watch that one. So it teaches you, part 2 teaches you about what to do when people don't follow your boundaries. Now, if you don't have boundaries, that's the problem. But if you do have boundaries and then they put it back on you, that's gaslighting. It's like, wait, you're just being too sensitive when you put up a boundary, right? You're just being whatever. And it's like, wait, no, you didn't hear my boundary. So people that don't follow your boundaries, that's also toxic. And that's part 2. That makes sense. Yeah, tough stuff. It's always family members that, you have to worry about usually. So here's some leafy issues here. So what's really going on? So after you take your little quiz back here, right? And I want you to say, what's really going on? And then add up your scores and be like, okay, in the last 7 days or I'm pretty often, I'm feeling really irritable. You're 4s. If you're all 5s, come see me. Come do a Zoom with me. Or come do an anger management class. I do that in private practice too. We can do a 2-hour anger management course anytime. So leafy issues, they're just surfacey. They're like, they change with the seasons. They can fall off and change. You can redo and undo them. Like junk values and addiction and thinking errors. Financial issues aren't forever. Failed relationships don't have to be forever. You can fix some of those, if you will. I don't like the word fix, but you can renew those. You can start over. Those are leafy issues. Aggression can totally be in there. Situational, right? We have been so much more irritable and depressed through this situational, time that we're in. And I think we're pulling out of that, hopefully, and we're doing better because we're out in the sunshine a little more. We're moving. We're getting back to normal routine. We just got to now get out of the acute stress and the adjustment and go back to our boundaries, go back to our routine, go back to our sleeping habits, and get out of our thinking errors, our addictions, and our junk values. The trunk, okay, is the secondary emotions that lead to the root. So if the leaves keep falling off, the analogy here is the leaves keep falling off and they feed the root, and you keep growing back the same problem, you're gonna keep feeding the root, and it's gonna now wire together. Okay. Now we can also do this positively. There's positive issues that fall off and feed the root, and it helps us, like, temporary therapy and treatment and learning and getting through different mindsets, going into a growth mindset. That could be temporary for a while, and then it feeds the root, and the root changes. The secondary emotions change for sure. But the root issue that sticks and that holds us down here from healing is loss, grief, and trauma. And I have a handout on this at the end that you can do look at for that. The self-concept, abandonment, shame, denial, but lots of trauma in the root. Okay. So chronic health issues, they're just stuck in there, right? They cause a lot of anger sometimes. But if you have chronic, now addiction's up here, but if you have chronic addictive properties, if you're using a substance ongoing, and that's called mental health, not met, that's spelled wrong. I think I fixed that once on something else. Then it can be in the root. But that doesn't mean it, but the thing is it can lift, right? It can get out of the root, and you can heal from that and move on from that for sure. All these things we can move up out of the root issue. That's the whole point of treatment. I do it all the time with EMDR, trauma focused getting rid of the patterns of the brain, you have to get rid of some of that stuff. Doesn't mean it's gone, but it just means it's not disturbing. So it's not disturbing anymore. Your trauma's in there, your loss and grief is in your root, but it doesn't have to be disturbing. So you can draw, I have people draw this all the time. So here's a tree, just draw a tree. If you have an issue going on, you have a work issue, put work issue up there. How does it make you feel? What's the root that's going on? What's really going on that makes you react in a different way? So this is how it grows and this is how it shifts. So just look at this list. I'll go fast because we're running out of time. So irritability, stuffing. Oh yeah, we've got to connect with the unharmed part of us and attune with that, release the shame, getting grounded, balanced, getting back power. That's how we do it. This is what causes all that, and the fatigue and the burnout, and the sleep issues. That's what, the goal is to get over here. So we have to connect, we have to have compassion, we have to have courage. So the repair part. So let's talk about how now we get through this, right? So this is the Four Horsemen. This is very, very researched. This is what kills relationships, even beyond, marriage partners or partnership, romantic partnerships. Contempt and criticism, defensive and stonewalling just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. This is what kills relationships. And with his 40 years of research plus. So a little bit of how to repair that. Criticism, you complain without blame, right? Because remember, if you're going to blame the other person, you're gaslighting. Take responsibility. That's opposite of defensiveness. Contempt is when you're going to just roll your eyes and you're going to be really passive aggressive or a little sarcastic and teasing, and you're like, oh, you do those little stabs. That's contempt. It's not helpful. Doesn't work. Stonewalling, shutting down emotionally and physically. Now, if you have an angry partner or you're being an angry partner, go into couples 101 workshop and go into the high conflict couple stuff. There's one called on the workshops. I think it's how to, it's more of the more of conflict management, it's called. So if you want more conflict management, go into that. But here's how we do some repair and conflict management. Kindness, understanding, compassion, consideration, empathy, service, love, gratitude, all those things is the words. So just pick one of these. Which one are you going to do? Which one will cause you to have a repair of conflict? So if you really are focusing on a growth mindset of what it is that you want to work on, pick one. So you have to pick trust or safety, because that always has to happen first, by the way. Then we have to have clear expectations. That is boundaries. Then we have to have listen for concern, clarifying questions, restate it. So that's boundaries part 2, back to that workshop I was talking about. That's the restating. Like, okay, now I have the clear expectations, but I'm going to restate it. And sometimes you're going to have to restate it a lot. But it's, and some of that is not negotiable. But if you're in a 2 people relationship and you're having a conflict and you have 2 people that are willing to negotiate and do a win-win, then you negotiate. That's the time to do it. And then to self-soothe. So if you're self-soothing, so back once again, to get to your frontal lobes, you have to be present. You've got to do some self-soothing. You've got to get back to here. So self-soothing is not self-care. Self-soothing behaviors develop during childhood. So you want to try to check in. If you're doing self-soothing behaviors that are depleting or damaging, self-harm, then, check in with yourself for sure. It's self-soothing behaviors are opposite of self-injury. So of any way. So even even, TV for a long period of time, food, alcohol, and physical harm, emotional harm. So check in with good self-soothing behaviors. Okay. And that's the definition of self-soothing. Repetitive action to regulate your emotions. Okay. So drinking a hot cup of tea is a great self-soothing. I go outside and sit in the sun every 5 minutes I can, because that's a self-soothing for me. Especially right now. There's lots of these little 5 to 10 minute distractions that you do as self-soothing. Okay, so a hot bath is self-soothing, but it's also self-care, but it's self-soothing because it does a lot of physiological repair for the body when you're in heat. So especially when you add Epsom salt, so things like that. Okay, a few more things here. So this is probably the most important slide, because this is the tools. This is what you need to check in, okay? So here's the aggression. Now we know what it is. What are we having, proactive or reactive? Are we getting gaslit by someone else? What do we need to do about that? But here's you. This is about you. So it's just, but learning about someone else's behavior is great, but you only have control over you. I mean, you've heard that, but it's taking a time out is number 1 in Gottman's research of a high conflict couple or any kind of conflict. Now, remember what flooding is. To get out of fight, flight, or freeze or flooding so you can self-talk, you got to get out of the way, out of your own way, okay? So taking a break is number 1. STOPP, this is my little card. I have these little cards and I would hand them out all the time. And so if someone had a problem with road rage, or something, then I'd make them, I would suggest putting this right on their mirror, right on their visor, somewhere where they can see it, everywhere. At home, when they, at work somewhere that someone bugs the heck out of them and they just can't stand this person at work, then we're doing these steps. Now, this is while we're still self-talking. Remember, 7 and under, you're going to do these things. And this is what I teach in the anxiety program for DBT skills. But this is just one thing that you can look at to go through the list. Oh, take a break, observe, pull back. And I actually mean pull back 2 feet, meaning step out of it 2 feet. So that's P, STOPP, one of the P's. And then the last one is practice, and practice what works. So I have a little handout at the end of this that you can print or whatever you can look at and write down. But these little cards just, okay, because this is going to help me self-talk, right? This is going to help me get there and be in my frontal lobes when sometimes I just don't, and sometimes you just need to walk away. It's not being passive. If you're saying, this is not helpful for me right now, and you walk, this is not helpful. It's a great statement to use. This is not, I can't talk. I don't want to talk about this right now. Or I will talk to you. Remember, I feel and I need, and then I'm willing to talk to you later after lunch. That's the example I give in the anger management classes that I would teach. So, so real quick, while you're looking at this slide, what are some common developmental self-soothings during youth? Developed self-soothing skills during youth. So when it's a defense mechanism, self-soothing is a defense mechanism. So if you're going to learn them in your youth, so I do have a whole self-soothing workshop. First, I have one on almost everything now, and there's a list. So self-soothing is touching a blanket, sucking their thumb, pulling their hair. So it can be healthy or not. Biting your fingernails is a self-soothing. It's those unconscious things that you're trying to soothe an emotion that you don't know you're having. So there can be harmful ones, and then there's okay ones, right? So, oh, I need to get something that I need to touch so I don't bite my fingernails. Okay, so a kid will be a very touchy, feely, need a soft blanket, right? So that's a self-soothing. It actually calms the dopamine in the brain. So self-harm also calms dopamine in the brain. So that's what happens. Does that make sense? So some other tools here. So your emotional intelligence, your secondary emotions, I've got, a handout for that, but use imagery. So of course I teach a lot of imagery in therapy, a lot of EMDR imagery connected to that. So lots of imagery, because remember, we have to relax the experience and go into knowledge, but because our body reacts only with experience. So we want to create new experience. So how can you do that? Visualization, meditation. The other part scientifically is omega-3s. That's just one of the supplements that are very, very important in calming the brain aggression. It's shown to be so vital in so many things. Omega-3 is for the brain. It's the good fat. We're not getting enough good fats to sustain us. And we need that in our diet. So you need 1 to 3 grams of EAP at least of that. That's the most, the DHE and the EAP, but EAP 1 to 3 grams of that. So make sure you're getting a really good omega-3, and it's not just from your, let's say, your big grocery store market or whatever. Okay. It's still Amazon. You just get it, but look at the type and the types of omega-3s. It's important. Repairing sleep, stress, and relationships, reducing addictive behavior, and caffeine and alcohol. That's scientific. Huberman talks about caffeine and alcohol. And of course, the sleep is essential. Sleep is number one. If you want to repair anything, number one is sleep. So this is the one YouTube. You can see Huberman on YouTube, Prime. What am I watching on? All kinds of things, and Spotify, and yeah. So he's everywhere. His podcast, but the one I've been talking about is number 73. And here's a few books and a whole bunch of other ones. If you, Why We Don't Apologize is a great one. The Dance of Anger for Women's Guide to Changing Patterns of Intimate Relationships. The Road Less Traveled talks about that balance and getting into a purpose of balance. Crucial Conversations, one of my top 5 books. It will never leave my top 5. It is essential. Great book. I have top 5 books and top 10 authors on my website. So let's see. So this is the handout for that, the stop that I was talking about. Here's my emotional wheel. That is, you can, just look at it, use it, print it off. You can go to Paperback Connections for a hard copy of this. And so basically, remember, loss, grief, and trauma was in that root issue. Powerless doesn't have to stay in the root. That's a leafy thing. We can gain back power. So higher purpose understood when we're on that side of the wheel. So these are all emotions. They're primary and secondary. It's just what's going on. They're all good. We just don't want to stay in something that, gets us stuck. Fair fighting rules. I think that's it. Okay, anything else that we had come through?
Did you see the question that was, what are some common inherently developed self-soothing skills during youth?
Yeah, so definitely in youth, it's childhood to youth. It's just the whole gamut of 10 to 26 until the brain develops. We actually produce some self-soothing behaviors because of either trauma, neglect, emotional neglect, attachment. We're trying to soothe an emotion that we don't know we're having. And it starts very young in the brain. It's like this subconscious thing. So I can't remember if it was the last anxiety program I taught. I asked, what are some self-soothing things that we all do? And sometimes you'll think about it, and you did that as a young child, and it's carried you through. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. But in adulthood, we do those self-soothing things like drink and shop and watch TV and do lots of self-soothing that way that ends up being more harmful.